All right, so we're going to look at resin printing today. I've got a whole selection of stuff out here. Some of these are not resin printed and some of them are. And because I just wanted to show kind of the difference between more traditional FDM style printing that we've been doing. I don't know if you actually, probably if you can't use the word traditional, because the first kind of printing that I'm aware of that was commercially available actually did involve resin. It's not this particular style of resin printing, but it was still a resin that cured with a light. This just happens to be a different light and a different type of resin. So let's look at some of these. So this guy, I drug him out as an unpainted example of FDM printing. We can kind of see, and I don't know how well these details will show up, but particularly the red color doesn't process very well on the video encoder, I don't think. But you see all these little bumps. But overall, it's not that bad. This guy was printed, I don't know, he was printed a while ago. We didn't print him as part of the class. I just found him as one of the ones that we had worked on earlier. So that's kind of typical. Maybe even on the good side, not great, but good side of 3D printing. Certainly this little guy would have been tough as a home level printer. Even 5 or 6 years ago would have been tough to do this. Now this is probably pretty typical. You can or average, somewhere in that range. You just get the printer out, start printing, and you get something like this. Then we actually did this one in class. Now he was one of the ones that we mesh mixed, so we got a lot of different. He is separate from this little pile of coins, from the skull back here and the base. They're all separate things. We stuck them together. We downloaded all of them from, I think they all came from Thingiverse. We downloaded them all, put them together, and painted him, printed him out FDM. So the fused deposition modeling, or FFF, fused filament fabrication, and pretty good. I think there's a lot of detail in there. I mean, certainly tell what it is. Then we went to this guy. He was not assembled by us. Somebody else created this model. We just printed it and painted it, and that's starting to look really good. You can still pick up the layer lines, like right in there on his leg. I think you can probably see some back here. I didn't sand it. This one's completely unsanded. All we did is print him, put him on this little base. His base is not printed. This one was for this guy, and obviously this one is. But this is a different base. We glued him on there, stuck some little debris down there, and sprayed him with adhesion promoter, a primer, and then painted him. So no sanding or anything, which could have, although it'd be really difficult. It'd be very tedious to go in there and sand like all this little stuff out of the way. That's why I didn't do it. Is kind of at that point you're really putting a lot of time into this little guy, which probably you don't want to do. But that looks really good. So these are all examples, and we did Yoda, baby Yoda anyway. There's not a lot. He's giant when we're zoomed in like that, aren't we? There we go. Pretty good. And this is one of the shiny type of filaments, so he looks like a little statue or whatever. There's a lot of detail in his collar over here. Just straight up printed, nothing after this guy. This was our guy that we used for the tree support in Mesh Mixer example. So you can get some really good detail out of just a regular printer, but for the same price, or in the same price realm anyway. I just looked, and you can find these style printers that we're about to look at anywhere from, I saw one from $170 to $260 is about the price range for this size and type of resin printer. So same price range that our Ender 3 is in, right in the middle of that price range. Now the Ender 3 can print larger objects, probably larger by a factor of at least 4. I'm looking at the bed over here. I can't see what I'm looking at. But the print surface of the resin printer that I'm looking at is probably 4 times smaller than what you could get on an Ender 3. Somewhere in that range, 4 or 5 times smaller. So if you're looking to print large things, then the resin printer that we're going to look at is probably not your best option. You could print a bunch of things and glue them together or whatever. But if you're looking to print reasonable sized things with lots of detail, then it's something worth looking at. So all of these are printed on the resin printer. So I have a green, this is the, oh, there's the number, UV 405 nanometers. So that tells you what wavelength light is going to cure this. There are different wavelengths that will cure different resins. And so what we're looking at is 405 nanometers. This is just a sample that came with an Anycubic printer I got, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. So this is actually relatively old resin, and it's this translucent green color. And all of these weren't printed on an Anycubic. These were printed on what's called a Phrozen Sonic Mini. And we'll talk about why that's different in a minute. But let's look at the prints first. So let's try and zoom in. Yeah, that's probably all we're going to be able to zoom in. See if we can look at. So here they are straight off of the print bed. It's hard to pick up any detail. That's why I've painted and primed some of these, because otherwise it's kind of all just runs together. Now these are, they do make some resins that are opaque, so you can't see through them. I actually like the translucent ones a little bit because you are printing with a resin that cures by light. So if you can get light all the way through the model, then there's a better chance that it's going to cure all the way through and not have some parts that are still a little bit under cured. So when they come off the printer, they're not 100% cured yet. They're pretty close, but they're not 100% cured, and you have to go and set them out in the sun, or I have a little thing over here that we're going to look at that is a curing chamber, so that they completely finish curing. So it's possible, if this was opaque, that some of that inner resin would be maybe not quite cured where the outer surface is, and then those different curings can cause it to crack over time. So I kind of like the translucent kind of stuff. You're not going to get anything that's perfectly clear. So if you're trying to print something that's perfectly clear, you're going to have to do a lot of polishing and coating and that sort of thing to get anything that even kind of looks perfectly clear. There are some that are, they're called optically clear, but they're not like a piece of glass or something. You can get something that's close, but in general, this is what they come out. They kind of are frosted or whatever. They have resins that are flexible. And the nice thing about these resins is they are liquid. So you can take a little bit of flexible resin and a little bit of some other resin, mix them together, and then you have a sort of flexible version of the other resin. Now, I didn't put any flex in here, so these are very brittle. In fact, I originally printed 7 of these, and this guy kind of failed. I'll look at him in a second, and the others broke. You know, they just, you know, I dropped them, and part of them broke off or whatever. So they're pretty brittle as is. These I printed as the first thing just to test out the printer. They were, I think it took 14 minutes to print these. These are for our blaster. They're the scope rings that'll go on the end. I printed them mainly to see the dimensional accuracy between, I printed this obviously on the FDM style printer, this on the resin printer, and you know, it actually fits together. This is a little bit smaller, but who's to say that this isn't a little bit bigger? I didn't actually go measure anything. I just wanted to see if the two files would fit together. Or maybe they're meant to be, you know, a little bit loose. I don't know. I didn't go measure what these sizes were supposed to be. I didn't calibrate anything. I just printed it. So it'll go in there. I also looked for, and I still haven't found, the chrome pen that I was talking about. I'll show you the one I'm talking about on Amazon. This is what I'm talking about for if you're trying to make something that looks chrome, like it's got the shiny, kind of thick coating of chrome on it. This is one way to do that, this pen. And there's several different sizes of this pen. And I think you can even get refills for this pen so that you have the liquid itself. That's all you really need. And you can paint it on or whatever. But this particular kind of pen does a really good job of making that kind of thick, what you expect a piece of plastic that's been electroplated with chrome to look like. So it's not necessarily looking like chrome metal, but chrome on top of plastic. Anyway, I still haven't found mine. Once I find it, then we'll use it, and I think it'll be good to make these chrome and then kind of weather them up or something, because they're the little rings that go on the end. This goes on the other end over here, so it'll fit, and it also did fit pretty well like that. Oh, the other thing, so remember this guy, 3 hours to print this guy. Let's zoom back out. 3 hours to print this guy at and he's at 0.15 layer height, I think is what I ended up printing him at. I don't exactly remember, but somewhere in that range, and it took 3 hours. I do remember that part. 7 of these guys in 2 hours at 0.05 millimeter layer height. So if you average that out, that's like 17 minutes to print one of these. You know, you took 2 hours to print 7 or so. Now, I will say that one of them completely failed. He was not even remotely usable. This guy, he kind of failed. His foot back here should be flat. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can kind of see how it's curved. I took all the default settings basically. So when you go to print these, you have to slice them just like you would on an FDM printer. And I just took all the default settings on support and everything. And we'll look at that in a minute. And that wasn't enough for this guy. He actually kind of failed there. These guys came out really well, and some of the other guys came out okay, but I broke them. So ended up with 4 in 2 hours. So that's still not, 30 minutes to print one is still faster than 3 hours to print one. And the build plate was pretty much filled up with 7 of these. I don't think you could have maybe fit some tiny little stuff in there, but this stuff's pretty small already. I did primer this guy so you can kind of get an idea of what kind of details you're looking at. See, it's a lot of details, and this is not even the thinnest layer height. You can go thinner than this. It obviously takes a little longer to print, but I would have to get in there with some kind of microscope or something. Let's turn the contrast actually down a little so you can see some shadows better. To find any layer lines on this. Now this is an organic shape. It's not particularly got hard edges. There's maybe some hard edges over here, but you really can't find. Now this guy has the layer of primer, so that's occluding a little bit of layer lines, where these guys, maybe if you look at the right kind of light on the top of their head, you might pick up a layer line. I don't know. It's hard to see. And then I painted this one, and I don't think you would ever know that there was that he was printed and not some kind of injection mold type setup. I think you'd be pretty well convinced that no, that's just a regular injection molded part. Same thing with these. I don't think that you would pick up that they were not injection molded somehow. So if you're going for something that looks like a professionally injection molded part, then these printers, as long as the part isn't too big, are a good option to consider. Now, they do suffer a little bit from dimensional accuracy. That's kind of why I printed these, just to see. They don't do as well without a lot of calibrating and watching the part, keeping dimensional accuracy when you print things in different orientations. So they're good when it's something that it doesn't matter if he's a millimeter off in one direction or even less, it doesn't matter, or more. So I don't think that the parts would be off a millimeter unless you were doing something that's kind of really large and you've lost some accuracy somewhere. So how do these printers work? Let's look at the printer. Now I can't open it up for very long because the resin, this particular resin, this stuff is really strong. So I normally keep this printer in another part. There's a little room over here that's kind of like a storage room. I keep the printer, this style printer, in there just because it is pretty noxious, at least to me. Maybe not everybody. And there are versions of resin that are less noxious as far as fumes go. But here's the printer. Let's go over here and look at it. There it is. And so let's see. Am I zoomed in? Nope. All right, so we're just going to have a hard time seeing everything. This guy in the back over here, this is actually a wash station, not part of the printer. It's actually a different brand. This is the Anycubic brand. This guy is the Phrozen Sonic Mini. What this one does in the background is it goes in and will do the cleanup for you, basically. So when these come off of, well, I'll print one in a minute. I'll print, or we'll attempt. They always could fail. You never know. But we'll attempt to print something in a minute. In fact, before we get too far, we'll do that. So it'll be going while we're looking at it. So in the background, when they come off of the printer, they're still coated in uncured resin, because down in this bottom down here, this bottom vat, it kind of looks blackish blue color on your screen. That is the resin in that tub there. And up here, this is the build plate that's going to lower down into the resin, and where the models are actually going to hang from this thing. So the build plate will come down and hang from there. Let's look at how this might work. Let's slice something and put it on the thing. So these are the knobs for the blaster that we've been working on. I thought maybe we'd try those. They look like they have lots of little tiny details, you know, in the knurling and the little edging here. So I'm a little worried because look at all this green area. So the way these print, they'll look like this, right? They'll print hanging from the build surface. That little plane there's the build surface. And they'll print hanging from it. And this build surface will lower into the resin. The UV light will cure one layer at a time. You can see the layers. If I scroll down, there's the different layers. They're basically all solid. You can print hollow, like an infill pattern. The deal with printing hollow here is that you have to relieve that liquid resin that you've trapped inside the thing. So you have to drill holes in it somehow. You have to design a hole in, a drain hole, or drill it out later or whatever, because you would not want to have these parts have a lattice network in them, but then trapped liquid resin in there, because it would never cure, or it would take forever to cure if it did cure. This one might eventually cure since the parts are kind of translucent in this particular material. But what would be the point in making it hollow if you just trapped a bunch of resin in it anyway? So if you make them hollow, you do have to leave a way for that resin to drain out. I'm just going to print these solid. When I sliced it earlier, it said it was like 17 cents worth of material or whatever. This resin is more expensive than a roll of filament. So a kilogram of filament is about $20, and a liter of this resin can be anywhere from around $50 and up. You might can get some cheaper ones, but in that range. That's for a liter. All right, so what I'm worried about this one is the way this is working. All of this area, everything that's printed, basically is stuck between, let's go back to the printer, stuck between the build plate and the bottom of this vat. The bottom of this vat is a clear piece of material that's similar to Teflon. FEP is what I don't remember what that stands for, but it's similar to Teflon. It's a low stick material that's translucent, or transparent actually, you can see completely through it. So there's a light underneath here that's going to shine up towards the resin and the build plate. In between the light and the build plate is a screen, an LCD screen. Now this particular one has a pure monochrome LCD screen, so that makes it a little bit better. You know, normally you think of black and white as not that much better. It's you know, why not a RGB? But what we want here is we want to either block light from the UV light source down in the base, or allow that light to pass. And so you kind of have a binary, either it goes through or it doesn't go through. And so the monochrome actually does a good job of that. It's either on or off. I think this one is maybe a 4K screen also in that same size. So you get a pretty decent resolution in X and Y. And then obviously Z is controlled by the platform moving up and down, which you can also get a very high resolution in. So anyway, that light shines through. It's always on. Well, it's not on right now, but when you're printing, it's always on. And what changes is the screen between the light and the vat here projects different patterns. And basically, it projects the patterns of whatever it is you're printing. So these different layers. Those are the images. Those light gray will be projected onto the screen. Actually, everything else will be blacked out, and where it's light gray here, we'll let the UV light shine through and cure the resin. Now, this particular printer is actually significantly faster than the Anycubic or the other style printers. There are many of these style printers that use a UV screen, but the ones that use the monochrome UV screen can print much, much faster. The layer cure time is in the 2-second range or so. So let's go over here and let's slice this thing, start it printing, see how it works, and we'll talk some more about stuff. All right, so normally what I'm worried is that all of this green is going to be stuck between the build plate and that Teflon-like material, and it has to release from the Teflon, so pop away from it, so that a new layer can be printed on top of that. And I'm kind of worried that this is a lot to release at one time, and we may have some of these sticking to the sheet and not the build plate. But we'll try it and see. We're going to slice it with all the generic settings. We're not going to do any support material. We could go in. Here's the actual images that are going to be displayed on the screen, just like that. There are supports that we could raise this off of the thing, tilt them a little bit. I'm just going to try printing them flat and see what happens. We put them on a USB just like normal. So let's save it. Let's save it on the USB drive though. Okay, eject that guy. Oh wait, no, it's still writing the file. Hold on. All right, now we can eject. All right. And then over here on the back, there's just a USB port. And then on the front, over here, we've got a panel that has a big print button. So we'll print. And then it shows me the different files. There's the one for the knobs. I know you can't see it, but that's the ones for the knobs. We would need to make sure that there's resin in here. I think there's enough resin. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, there's a little hair or something floating in the resin. So I'm going to open it up for a moment to try and move that out of the way. And this particular resin is very smelly. So there's the sheet underneath there, and there you can kind of see the resin, how thick it is. And that's kind of typical of how thick it is. The other thing you should have, which I forgot, see if we can balance that, is you should have a lot of paper towels. All right. Because it is very messy. And this stuff only cures with UV light. So cleanup is with something like isopropyl alcohol, things like that. In fact, that's what's in this chamber back here. All right, now I think we're good. Just hit go. There's no warm up. There's no bed heating. Actually, you can heat these. You know, if you're in a cold environment, you can heat the surrounding area just to keep your resin a little more lower viscosity, not so thick. But it's pretty hot here, so I'm okay with the heating as it is. But there goes the print surface down into the vat. I realized that I didn't actually go back and check the print surface. I'm pretty sure I left it more or less level. Basically, you level it by putting a sheet of paper between, you remove the vat, put a sheet of paper down, lower this thing, and level it. So there you can go see. I've got this first layer. In fact, let's check. Got this first layer set. Let's see, where am I? Oh, settings. There it is. There are going to be 6 bottom layers at bottom layer exposure time 25 seconds on the first few layers. On those first 6 layers. I probably don't need 6 bottom layers for this particular thing, but you really want it to cure and stick. And I was talking and you couldn't hear it, but you actually did hear at least some of it peel away from the FEP sheet, the FEP sheet on the bottom here. It actually makes a little popping sound, so you can hear it popping away. I don't have any idea if all of it popped away or not, though. We'll have to find out. This print says it would take, let's slice it again and read the details on it. 23 minutes for these. It's going to take, 17 cents worth of material. I heard it pop away that time. And I heard at least 2 pops, although there's, 5 different knobs on here. It's going to take 5 milliliters, 5.5 milliliters of material. Each one of these resins has their own profile, and you kind of have to tweak it for your setup. There are a lot of Excel sheets online that you can type in your printer and whatever, Anycubic green or whatever, resin profile. Maybe you heard it that time with the little pop sound. That's what you actually want to hear, that popping sound, because it means it's coming off of the sheet at the bottom, the clear sheet, and at least some of it sticking to the bed. Hopefully all of it. We'll find out. Anyway, there's all these different resin profiles where you can go in and change. Somebody has gone in and figured out, all right, so you want this lift distance, this exposure time. All right, it's sounding like it's coming off the right way. And, how long do you wait between curing each layer, all that kind of stuff. Here's the infill section. I didn't leave any infill because it made no sense to try and, I didn't want to try and hollow them out and drain them anyway. You can put in, $30 per liter for this particular resin, and it'll give you an estimate on the cost. It gave us 17 cents to make these, really cheap. 23 minutes. I don't think we could print this on a FDM style printer faster than 23 minutes, and we certainly could and get the level of detail. We couldn't print at 0.1 millimeters all of these parts in 17 minutes or in 23 minutes. So there are some cases where once your resin printer is dialed in, then you actually are being cheaper to do resin printing. You do have a lot of failures up front, though. There are probably more failures on this style. Let's get that out of the way. This style printing than there are FDM printing. So it's going to keep track down here. It's 5% done. Layer 9 of 140. I'm not hearing the little popping sound now, but now you can see it's past those first 6 layers, and each one of these lifts and back down is a new layer. And on a other style of this type printer, resin printer, that time is 9 seconds per layer, and we're doing 2 seconds per layer. Of course, our parts may not come out, but so far, all the things I printed on it have come out, other than that one goblin thing that didn't come out at all. So what we're going to do, let's talk a little bit about different styles of this resin printing, because this isn't the only style. What this one is this is a UV LCD screen. So there's a UV light underneath an LCD screen. The LCD screen projects different patterns, and those patterns let that UV light either pass through and cure resin, or they block it from curing resin. So you can selectively cure different portions of the resin. So that's what's happening now in this kind of machine. There are other types of this machine that instead of using an LCD screen, they actually use a little projector, and they just project the pattern. So they don't try to block the UV light. They just project the pattern that they want onto the same setup. So same vat of resin, and you project a DLP, digital light projection, I think is what that stands for, a DLP type light source onto the thing. Both of those are pretty much the same idea. You're selectively curing an entire layer at one time. So you're either projecting onto that entire layer all at once, or you are occluding a UV source and letting some of that UV go through, but all at the same time. So that's what makes them so fast, is that each layer is done all at once. You don't have to go trace around every little part of the layer. The other style of this, or the other major style of resin printing, is the oldest style, where you have a vat full of resin, and it cures with a laser, and you take and draw the laser pattern onto the surface. It's slightly slower because you do have to draw everything, but you can draw that laser so fast that it's not much slower than this. But you do tend to get higher resolution, and you can print much bigger parts. Here, the part size is limited by the size of the LCD screen that I can put underneath or put between the UV source and the resin. Now there are some bigger versions of this. This is the smallest version. And so the build plate, you could see it there. That little surface is all you can stick your models to. So it is pretty small, and like I said, it's at least 4 times smaller than like the Ender 3, maybe even smaller than that. Now that I'm looking at it, because that's only a couple of inches, it might be more in the range of 6 times smaller than a Ender 3 type printer. We're 21% done. We're on layer 31. Like I said, the advantage of these, not only do you get higher detail, but they're actually pretty fast when you think of, I can cure an entire build plate at one time. Each layer, I can cure the entire thing at once. So when you take advantage of that, then they start to compete with FDM style printers, which have a bigger volume, but they have to draw every line individually on the build surface. Let's see. What will happen next is this thing will finish. We're a quarter of the way done or so. The parts on hanging from here, hopefully they're hanging from here. I can't really tell yet until it's pretty much done. At least this vat is transparent. You can see through it. So if I were to open it up, I could look through there and see if stuff was actually sticking to the thing. I really don't want to open it up right now though, because it is pretty smelly. But I'm going to assume that something stuck there. So what we'll do is this knob on top, you can kind of see it's off the top of your screen kind of. Let's zoom up a little bit. There we go. This knob on top will remove the entire build plate. We'll drain it a little bit because it's got resin sitting on top of it, and it's going to have uncured resin all over it. So we'll let it drain a little bit. And then I'll take it over to here, to this guy, and we'll put our parts in a basket, scrape them off of the build surface that they're stuck to. Sometimes they can be stuck pretty well, so we'll have to scrape on them a little bit. This is a plastic scraper. This build surface, you don't want to scratch it up because that will directly impact your parts sticking to it. Definitely want to have some kind of gloves because this resin here, not only does it smell, but they sell some that they kind of call it non-toxic, but I don't know the exact non-toxicity of that. But it's generally, this resin is the kind of material that increased exposure to it actually makes it worse. So a lot of times you think of, hey, if I've touched this over and over and over again, I've kind of gotten immune to it. It's actually the opposite for most people with this style resin. The more it gets on you, the worse your response comes from it. So you get these chemical burns. They're not I'm not going to get any instantly, but if you're a particularly messy person, this is probably not the thing you want to be doing. So definitely have some kind of nitrile gloves of some sort, so that if you do get it somewhere, be prepared to clean up because it's going to drip a little bit. Our goal is to get the parts from here into this basket into here. So inside here is some IPA, some isopropyl alcohol. We'll put our basket with the parts in here, let it wash them. Basically, it's going to spin around and kind of get some of that uncured resin off of there. then I really need to wash them with water, so I may have to disappear for a little bit, go rinse them off. This station, then I take this bucket out of here, and there's a UV array in this column on the back. I don't know if you'll see it just yet. And a little platform underneath here that I do need to go ahead and get out. So let's take this one open. So this little platform will put our clean but still not permanently cured parts on this, and it will rotate around and cure them. Maybe we'll flip them over and cure them again. It goes in 2, 4, and 6 minute increments. This thing, I don't know how much this costs anymore. Let's see if I can find out. It's called the Anycubic Cure and Wash Station. Well, here's one for $90 with free shipping, and and some resin, a 500 milliliter bottle of resin for $89. And then there's another one for $100, and there's another one for $200 and $170. So it looks like if you shop around, you get different prices on these things. All the same thing. I've only seen Anycubic produce one of these. There probably are other versions out there now, but this is the first one that was kind of commercially put together. You don't have to have one of these for resin printing, but it makes it so much cleaner and easier to deal with. Because otherwise, what you do is you get these parts out. You still need to wash them in something like IPA. So maybe you get a big jar of IPA and drop them in there. Let them swish around a little bit, rinse them off, and then you still need to cure them. So you put them outside, let the UV from the sun cure them. You build you a little UV chamber with some UV LEDs or something. And so this just kind of simplifies everything. It's all in one little station, and it makes it a lot cleaner. So it does cost, it's not free. But I would think that if you were seriously interested in resin printing, this would be this would be your second, well, maybe your third purchase. First one is the printer, then you buy some resin, then you buy this thing. Because it really does make it a lot nicer. I actually don't like resin printing because of how messy it is I didn't like it until I got this thing, and it made it a lot better, because it just does a lot of the messy part for you. You still have to deal with, there's changing out the IPA, which is actually hard to find right now. It's kind of hard to find isopropyl alcohol right now at a reasonable price. It should be $1 a bottle or $2 a bottle. And you can find it, but it's $12 a bottle or whatever. So there's that going on. We're over halfway done on our print here. I really can't tell. I do see some things adhered to the surface here. I have no idea if they're what we want. But I figured we'd try a print and see what would happen live. It may work, it may not. I haven't. A lot of these things you do need to sit in that slicer in here and actually, try and figure out. Now these are all one file. They're not individual files. But let me show you. Let's open up one of those. There's one of the goblins. Let's open him up. So here's what you typically, this is actually the one that failed on me. So they come in however they come in. I don't know that this particular piece of software has an auto arranger, to find the best type of orientation, but typically the best orientation is something where the model is kind of tilted backwards a little bit if it's going to need support. So those knobs I don't think need support unless they won't stick to the build plate. Maybe we'll turn this guy a little bit, but he's leaning backwards. So what this will do is it will put all the support on his back, which is typically not the part you're looking at. And so the supports sometimes can leave little nubs where they connect. Let's show you what the supports look like. Let's just auto support. So this is what I did with the models last time. I just did the auto support thing. And all of these little gray columns, you know, and you kind of see where they're touching him. That's where they're connecting, and those can leave little nubs. Now, with the automatic version here that I used on the ones I just showed you, these things literally just peeled off. There was no problem getting them off of there. I didn't have to go in and do anything complicated. So the general procedure when you're using supports, the one that I like to use is do the washing. So the wash station over here, then remove the supports, then cure. So if you cure the supports, they tend to leave more residue behind, so little nubs of where they were connected to the part at. So I think what works best for me is to go ahead and clean them up and wash them, but then right after you wash them, just pull them off before you cure them. So you can kind of see, and you can go in, and there are all sorts of, like, you can control the top, the middle, the bottom, what kind of raft they're on. So you can control all these different sizes for the supports. You can even add more supports by clicking. Maybe there's a spot like, I really don't think that I don't know, this part right here is going to print, and you can click there and it'll say, all right, well, we'll add a support there. You can remove them also. I think, is it control? Don't remember what actually removed. Oh, alt. Whoops, we removed everything. I don't think there's an undo, so. I don't know why we're not showing our model. Let's just delete him, and I don't know what I clicked something that deleted it. I don't know. Or no, I've clicked something that is just not showing him, and I don't actually know what I clicked on there. Unless it's just like floating. No, he's not way out there. I'm not sure what I actually clicked that caused the model to hide. I don't see anything here it's just showing. Oh, that would kind of give you, this picture here gives you an idea of how much you could fit in there. So one trick you can do on these, since they do have a relatively small build surface, is they have a pretty tall build volume, and you can actually layer things. So you can print layers of whatever you're going to print. A lot of these printers are used for dental molding type things, and let's see if I can find one. Oh, well, I probably should. Resin printer. Not resin. Jewelry casting is another thing that you can do. There are castable materials. I'm not seeing any of the ones where they've got a stack of these printed, but you can stack your parts one on top of the other with basically a support structure between them, and print models on top of models. I'm gonna have to find a picture of that. I don't know why I have got it to where you can't see the model right now, or if it's kind of crashed in a way. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some button that hides the model. I don't know why, but I guess so you can. Oh, there is one that you can hide it so you can see the support, but I don't remember what it is. Oh well. Let's see where we're at on our printer. 85% done. I can definitely see that some parts are there, so at least some of them will work. We're getting pretty close to it being done. We're on layer 122 out of 140. It's actually just printing one knob now. The tallest one. Let's see if I can get you down there to see the... on here it displays what it's printing. So right in this area, right there, it shows that's what it's printing right now. So it's basically giving me a little mini version of every layer that it's printing. And it doesn't matter that it's only one little thing on here. That layer takes just as long as the layer that was completely filled with everything else. So it doesn't speed up like an FDM printer would when you've finished all the low models and now you're on the taller one. The FDM printer will actually speed up because it doesn't have to travel as many different places on the bed. So that's sort of a disadvantage, but that's the way these work, is that every layer takes the same amount of time to print, no matter what's on it. We've got 12 layers to go, so that's, you know, not even a minute, because each layer is 2 seconds. So we're getting close. Not quite as boring as watching paint dry, but it is similar. That's why I picked something that wasn't going to take terribly long to print. You can imagine that if the layers are even thinner, again, this is 0.05 millimeter layer height. So that's on your Ender 3 without changing anything, the nozzle diameter in particular, you're not going to get down to 0.05 millimeters. Not with any kind of accuracy. In general, on printers like the Ender 3 that have a nozzle, that nozzle diameter basically gives you a range of what are valid layer heights. Typically 25% to 75% of that nozzle diameter, that's your layer height that you can print at. So for a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, you can basically go down to 0.1 millimeter layer height, and up to 0.3 millimeter layer height. 3 layers left. All right, let's go ahead and get it set up so you can see more of these other steps going on. Let's get some paper towels ready. Because there's a good chance that we'll have some drips. Maybe we'll catch them here. All right, this is the last layer. All right, so now it's raising all the way up. And now we'll get to finally see, you know, if you're putting something in this height range, you can see if it's working or not. And you can open this cover. This cover is red, so it's blocking some of the UV light from getting in there and curing the resin. You can open it up for a while. It's not going to instantly, unless you're sitting out in the blazing sun or whatever, it's not going to instantly cure your resin. So you can open it up and check on it and things like that. Oh yeah, I think they all worked. I don't know if they're all perfect, but they all are stuck there. So here we go. I'm going to let it finish getting all. It's going to raise all the way to the top because it does it. There we go. All right. So let's do this. And let's go ahead and put one of our gloves on here so that we have a little bit of not getting this stuff all on us. So I want to drain that uncured. Look, there's the knobs. They look good. They look like they might be slightly squished on the bottom, like the bottom layers. I remember I had said that I didn't know that we needed 6 bottom layers. I think we might have too many bottom layers and they're a little squished on the bottom. I don't know if I'll be okay with that or what. We'll see. All right, so now what I need to do is scrape them off into this basket. What I would normally do, if I wasn't, you know, doing this in a hurry, is I would just let this drain a long time so that we get all of the uncured resin as much as possible back into the vat. But we're kind of speeding along here. because I know you don't want to sit here and watch me hold this thing that long. So we're speeding it up a little bit. All right. So here, what I want to accomplish, see, I already dropped a piece. So I want to get these to come off into here. Let's see, actually something like this. And they're stuck on pretty well. There's one. It actually helps when you do have a little raft support underneath there, because the rafts, oh, I thought I broke it, but I didn't. All right, so let's put this guy back and close this thing up so we can quit smelling it. All right, so that guy can go back. There we go. Now this is going to go over here. Actually, we don't really need the gloves for this part. They're just kind of getting in the way. Put this guy down in there. Like that. Oh, if you do get one of these cure stations and you're having trouble with it, it requires you to have the lid on there. There's a little sensor in the back that without that lid on, it won't actually do anything. So I've switched it over to wash. I'm just going to do a 2-minute wash, and we'll start it. And then it's got a little magnetic drive down there, kind of like a stirrer in your chemistry class or whatever. And it will wash those parts. They're flying around in there. You can, if you don't want to try and remove them from the bed here, there is a little attachment. I need more IPA to get it, way up at the top here, but there is an attachment that will let you put the bed and all directly in there, so you don't have to use the basket. You can just put the whole thing in there and cure it while it's still attached to the bed. And that might make it a little bit simpler to remove, to not cure it, clean it. All right, let's get the resin off of our scraper here while that's happening. Okay, now it's going to go the other way. I am going to use some gloves again for getting them out of there. The IPA, it's just isopropyl alcohol, and they will have a little bit of the resin. So what I would normally do is I would go and wash these, but I don't have a thing to wash them in right here, so that's more an outside thing. You don't really want to wash the resin down the drain or anything like in your sink. So you what you do is you wash them in a container, and then if you leave that container outside, and if it's like a glass jar or whatever, then any uncured resin in there will become cured. It'll cure in the sunlight, and you can just remove it later once it's cured. All right, so we're done with the wash. Well, that was a 2-minute wash. I mean, you might normally wash longer than that. So there's our little parts. So again, the stage we're at now would be a wash them with water, air dry them a little bit. We're going to get rid of this thing now. It has an airtight lid so that you don't evaporate all of your IPA in there. So let's look at what we're dealing with right now. Where's the, there they are. So before they're cured, they actually look really clear. They still have some of the IPA on them, so they're a little shiny. They will not stay that clear. the curing that we're about to do next kind of makes them a little bit hazy. You can restore some of that curing by spraying them with a clear coat. And we washed them. Here the washing was just trying to wash them here. The better you wash them and get any residual IPA off of them, the less hazing will occur. Alright, so now we're going to switch over to cure. I'll do a 2-minute cure. Normally I do 2 6-minute cures. So I do one side and then flip it over and do cure on the other side. So you can kind of see the LED array in the back. That's the UV light. And then it's got a little turntable to get to all the different sides of them. And like I said, 12 minutes, so 6 minutes on each side, and they rotate around is usually enough to cure these things pretty well. But we're just going to do a 2-minute cure and then look at them. And I'll probably go back and cure them some more if they turn out looking like something we can use for our blaster. And we've almost got all the parts printed now. There's just a few parts left. So I hope that gives you a decent idea of how the resin printing process works. It is a little messy, it can be. We didn't make a big mess though this time. You do have to have a plan in place for how you're going to deal with all the mess, because at any point this stuff's going to drip. It's going to, you got to be careful when you're moving the thing. You really want to leave the printer stationary, because this stuff dripping all over the place is, you don't want it on the LCD screen. The LCD screen in here itself, or in here, the one, not this one down here, not this one, but the one in the machine that's controlling the UV light going through it or not, it's basically a consumable. So you do have to be prepared that over some number of hours, but it's like 200 hours or something, many hours of printing, that you are going to have to replace that LCD screen. They're in the $40 range, and it's not terribly hard to replace them, but they are consumable. Eventually that LCD screen will lose pixels or burn out or whatever, so it is a consumable. So again, I would cure these on the other side also, but because see, it's still got a little bit of something on there. I mean, it looks really good, but you can kind of see down here where it flares out at the bottom. Well, maybe if I am able to get that in the right, see that white ring around the bottom of it, it's flared out a little bit there. That is those bottom layers being actually a little too stuck to the surface. So I might tweak these. I might just leave them the way they are, because we're just trying to put this thing together and see how it works for the blaster is what I'm talking about. And so you can kind of see where I'm getting some that little smudge spot, because I didn't do a good job of washing these things from the IPA. And that's what the IPA will do when you go to cure, is it'll leave some of that white residue. All right, next time, I don't know what we're doing. I haven't even looked. Let me see if I can find out real quick. Let's see. We're getting pretty close to the end of the sequence of intro stuff. I think we're going to go look in the firmware again. Remember, we changed the firmware on our board, or we changed the board to a SKR Mini E3 board, and we haven't actually done anything with the firmware. We've just used pre-built firmware on it. We did change the pre-built firmware, but we didn't modify it ourselves. So we'll look at how to do that. Some of the other things coming up are photogrammetry. So that's where you take a bunch of pictures of an object you want to model and let the computer figure out what it's supposed to look like in 3D. So those are some of the things that are coming up. Some talks about stepper motors, things like that. But again, we're getting pretty close to the end of the course. And if you have any particular things that you want to go over, let me know. Send me a comment or something so that I know that this is something that's interesting, and we'll try and add it in as one of the last few topics we have. See you on Friday.